Hey, fellow scholars! So today we're going to talk about one of the most popular books ever written, at least according to some lists, A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And since many of you may be studying this book, or might want to read it just for fun, I thought I'd help you out by summarizing the entire book with all the major events and the hidden meanings. So let's begin. In our video on the main ideas and themes of this book, we will look at the meaning of the title and discuss what makes this book a timeless classic. Alright, so the story takes place in London and Paris late in the 18th century, right before the French Revolution breaks out, and yes, the whole story is framed as a historical novel. So the first line in the book famously goes like this: "It was the best of times. It was the worst of times," which sets the tone for the whole story. We see that everything is changing in both England and France. The old systems are coming apart, and new ones are rising in their place. But how exactly does Dickens describe these changes? Well, for that we need to move on to the next part of our summary. Book 1 is called Recalled to Life. One day, Jarvis Lorry, a banker in London, gets ready to take a trip to Paris. As he prepares, he thinks about a time when there was a lot of unrest in France and also in England. Back then, people said that if they had a mind to make the streets run with blood, they could. But now those days are over. However, something tells him that he will soon see blood running through the streets again. When Laurie arrives in Paris, he meets an old friend, Dr. Alexandre Manette, who has spent the last 18 years in prison. Dr. Manette used to be a successful physician, but now he is physically and mentally exhausted because of the terrible things he has seen and experienced in prison. You see, when he was arrested, his crime was only that he was the father of a young girl who refused to sleep with Marquis Saint-Evremond, the cruelest man in France. When the Marquis offered her father a noble title and a seat in the French Assembly in exchange for his daughter, Dr. Manette chose to spend 18 years in jail instead. Now, since he's been locked up for so long, this doctor has lost all hope of seeing his daughter again. But fortunately, he will soon be reunited with her, and you'll find out why right now. As they leave the prison, Laurie and Dr. Manette meet Dr. Manette's daughter, Lucy, who has no idea that her father is still alive. She is shocked to find out that he has been in prison, and she immediately begins to care for him and help him get better. After they arrive in London, Lucy's beauty and kindness save Dr. Manette's life. Now, in the meantime, we are also introduced to another character, Sidney Carton, an English lawyer who seems to have great potential, but he wastes his talents drinking and making fun of people. We also meet Charles Darnay, a French nobleman who hates the way his family treats people. Charles decides to abandon his aristocratic lifestyle and to start a new life in England. Later, we will find out that he is Lucy's perfect match, but can she see it? Well, actually, she can, but Sidney Carton also falls in love with her. However, he believes that he doesn't deserve her love because of how lazy and irresponsible he is. One day, Charles Darnay is accused of being a spy, but luckily for him, he looks a lot like Sidney Carton, so Carton is able to convince everyone that he was actually the spy. In the end, Darnay is acquitted and everybody moves on with their lives. But here's the catch. Lucy and Darnay fall in love, get married and have children, while Carton continues to pine for her from afar. Although he loves her very much, he knows that he isn't worthy of her and is content just watching her from the sidelines. However, the peace and quiet in London don't last for long because the French Revolution is raging and thousands of aristocrats are being killed. Even though Darnay doesn't seem to have anything to do with politics, he decides to return to France to help an old family servant who is about to be put to death. Unfortunately, when he arrives there, he's arrested and thrown into prison as an emigrant enemy of the revolution. Now, Sidney Carton comes up with a daring plan to rescue his friend Darnay, and here's what he does. Since he and Darnay look identical, Carton cuts off all of his hair and shaves off his beard, and then he switches places with Darnay. So Carton goes to Paris as a prisoner, and Darnay escapes to England with his wife and child. When Carton faces the tribunal, he behaves in such a scandalous manner that they sentence him to death by guillotine. But he doesn't care because he is happy to sacrifice himself for the sake of his friend and his friend's family. Before his execution, he writes a letter to Lucy in which he explains that he took her father's place in prison and that now he is taking her husband's place. So she shouldn't blame herself for what happens to him next. Then he steps onto the guillotine and dies saying these famous words, "It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known." Now with Book 3, The Track of a Storm, we come to the end of the story. At the beginning of the book, we learn that Sidney Carton's sacrifice saved Charles Darnay and his family. Right now, they are safe and sound in London, and nobody knows what happened to Carton. But at the end of the story, Dickens assures us that Darnay and his family will never forget what Carton did for them. Moreover, every year on the anniversary of Carton's death, Lucy and her children go to the place where he is buried and put flowers on his grave. And that's it, folks. We have reached the end of the summary. If you have been with me until now, thank you very much. I know that was quite a bit of information to process, but hey, that's the price you pay for wanting to understand one of the greatest novels ever written. So I really hope it was worth it. Now, as promised, let us wrap up this summary with a few key themes, and then I'll tell you why this book is so popular. Well, the first theme is sacrifice and redemption. Indeed, Sidney Carton sacrifices his life to save the life of Charles Darnay. But I would argue that he also redeems his life. You see, throughout most of the novel, he's been wasting his time and talents drinking and doing nothing. But by sacrificing himself, he finally accomplishes something great, which makes him a better person. In other words, Carton is redeemed in the eyes of God and in the eyes of the reader. Another important theme in this story is resurrection. First, of course, we have Dr. Manette, who literally comes back to life when he reunites with his daughter. But besides that, we also have the resurrection of Sidney Carton and Charles Darnay. Carton rises from being a frivolous lawyer to a hero, and Darnay rises from being a spoiled aristocrat to a humanitarian man of the people. The next theme I want to highlight is revolution and justice. You see, when the French Revolution breaks out, it seems like everything is falling apart. People are divided into two camps. On one side, we have the aristocrats who are cruel and selfish. On the other side, we have the revolutionaries who are merciless and unforgiving. In the end, the revolutionaries win, but what do they accomplish? Well, actually, not much. Madame Defarge wants to kill all the Evremont family members, but she can't stop even after she gets what she wants. So the novel shows that revolutions rarely solve anything, and that they often turn into a bottomless pit of violence and bloodshed. Next, we have the theme of love and loyalty. In the story, we see several examples of true love, especially the love between Lucy and her father. Also, Lucy is described as a golden thread that connects different characters in the story. For example, she becomes a symbol of humanity and compassion in a world full of hatred and violence. And of course, we can't forget Sidney Carton, who loves Lucy very much, even though he knows that she doesn't feel the same way about him. Through his love for her, he becomes a better person, and he eventually sacrifices his life for her happiness. Now, what do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button. It really helps me grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more summaries and literary analyses. I will see you next time.